hustle when we grind to get to where we're at. Our purpose we will find, so we gotta stay on track. Wasn't easy for no one, life is tough, we understand. No, you're the chosen one, this is all part of the plan.
It's all part of the plan and it's game time. Regardless of the struggle, man, we still grind. Always motivated and hustle, so we all rise. Minority Report, future bright, so we all shine. Let's go.
All I ever wanted was my dream. It's like you want it ever what it seems. I want the life you better hustle, hard. It's to me I can do it, I go hard. And they gon' know I did it from the start. You want it all, you gotta hustle.
This is
The Minority Report
Movement.
The views, thoughts, and opinions on this podcast are solely ours and do not reflect the institutions and organizations we are affiliated with. Episode 8, Marian's Story.
All right, so welcome to back to another episode of the Minority Rapport. We are 4 soon-to-be PAs with different backgrounds, attending different programs with different life experiences, bringing awareness to various issues that affect students on their journey to healthcare and medicine. Everything discussed on this podcast reflects our own personal thoughts and views, and not those of the institutions we attend, other colleagues, or other affiliates of this podcast. My name is Sato. Today I am joined by Aaron, my fellow podcaster, and please welcome my dear friend Marian, who I've known since 2011, I think, when we used to work together as ER scribes.
Yes.
Why does that
I think it
feel
was
like
2011, 2012.
so long ago?
I know. Sato
It's
was literally
old.
in the trenches with me.
Man,
It's
look
been
how
a
far we've
while.
come.
Any athletic-looking Sato is what she remembers.
Oh my gosh.
Hey man, golf is still a sport.
Golf is a sport. Golf is a sport for me. Now that I'm old and, breaking down, it's a perfect sport for me.
Oh my God. Those were the good old days. We learned so much scribing though. Like,
Oh, we did. Absolutely.
yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
actually really grateful for that experience. Yeah.
Me too. I can definitely agree that scribing was one of the better experiences, along with ER tech, probably, that I
Yeah,
had.
definitely.
Absolutely. But yeah, no. Tell us about yourself. Introduce us to introduce yourself to our listeners, and I'll stop.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be amongst these 2 guys here who've been paving the way for the PA profession and getting ready to do even better things after graduation. But yeah, my name's Marian. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles, California. I went to UC Riverside for undergrad. Even
Our
though
side?
I was there, me and Aaron didn't know each other.
Yeah, small world.
What year did you graduate, Aaron?
So I was there from 2009 to 2014. I graduated 2014.
Okay, we were there together at some point because I graduated 2011. So
Okay.
we were there together, but
We were
just
at the
didn't know
hub
each other.
together. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
we just didn't never ran into each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went to UCR, and then after I graduated, like Sato was saying a little bit, I became a scribe right after graduation. That was actually my first medical job. And then after scribing, a little bit after scribing, I became an EMT, and I was kind of doing that simultaneously. So I worked for an IFT company. I didn't do a 911. And so I did that I was working at an IFT company for about 2 years, while simultaneously with scribing. And then I kind of got over being at my company. So I then transitioned into doing research. So I worked in clinical research for about 3 years. I all while keeping the scribe job. I never let go of the scribe job because it was just so flexible, and I got along with the team so well at the hospital that Sato and I were working at. And I didn't want to let that position go because it was I made some great connections there. So yeah, I feel like I've always had at least 2 jobs, maybe 3. And so then I ended my EMT career just to restart it back up again 2 years later. At that point, our scribing company was expanding to more hospitals. So I ended up leaving the hospital that Sato and I were at, and I transitioned to another hospital, and I became a trainer there. And so I got really, really quaint with the staff at the new hospital I was working at, and come to find out that one of the techs, his brother and I used to work together. So they're actually twins. Cause when I saw him, I was like, oh my God, Saran, is that you? And I had no idea he had a twin. So I was like, Saran, what's up? And he was like, no, I'm Sapan, his twin. And
What
so
were
it was
they?
like, I believe they are, they're Asian, but I don't know their
Are they
specific
Cambodian?
national. They're not
Okay.
Cambodian. I want to say they were. I don't want to mess it up. I want to say they were Korean, but I honestly don't. I don't remember. I don't remember. They're not Korean. Saran and Sapan. That's what their names were. So
I'm pretty sure those are Cambodian names. That's why. That's all.
Really?
That's the only reason why I'm saying
No,
that.
they were Thai. They were Thai. That's
Oh, okay, that
exactly
makes
what they
sense.
were.
That
They
makes
were
sense.
Thai. It just rang in my head right now. They were Thai. And so it was so funny because like I ran into him like when I first got there, and I was like, oh my God. Because we used to be like partners and like work together on the rig and stuff. So, and then she was like, no, that's my twin, and I was just like, oh, okay. So then I got to know him, and he was actually the one who got me my ER job at UCLA. So that's how I transitioned there. So I kind of had a lot of jobs before applying to PA school. But I also, while like working these jobs, I also did my own version of a post-bacc. So I went back to like community college and retook a bunch of courses. Sato and I have that same journey too, with getting into PA school with like a lower GPA. So it took a while, I retook a bunch of courses, and then I applied to PA school after after I retook all my prereqs. I applied, and I didn't apply to a lot of programs, but I didn't get in anywhere, not one interview, nothing. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I was like, okay, like, I feel like at this point I've, exhausted what I can do. I was like, I've retaken as many classes as I possibly can. I have a lot of experience under my belt at this point. And then I just didn't know what the next step was. And I kind of talked to my mentor at the time. He was like, maybe consider like a master's. Cause like, I never thought I didn't know that like special master's programs existed. I just was like, oh, okay. Like, I thought it was like, I had to do like a traditional 2 years and then write a thesis and do all that. And so she was like, no, look into it. Cause I know like AAMC has like some programs, like most of them are geared towards med students, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get in, so I like went to AAMC, and I was just like looking up a bunch of programs, and they had like a lot of great programs, or a lot of programs for like students wanting to transition into like professional school and using like the master's as like a resume builder or like a helper aid for your application. So I did a 1 year. So like after I didn't get into PA school, I applied to a special master's program at Chatham University in Pittsburgh. So I moved to Pittsburgh, and I was there for 2.5 years. And I completed my program, did very well, made some great connections out there. And then after I completed my program, I applied to PA school like immediately. So I like submitted my app I think like early. It was like either end of April or early May. I was like, I need to get it in. I was like, early application is key. So I applied to way more programs the second time around. And I was lucky enough to land my interview at where I go now, Charles Drew, and I got in. So like my story kind of like, I kind of had like a 6-year journey to getting into PA school. It was not easy. There were times where I felt like I just want to like give up and maybe move on to something else. But I always feel like if there's a will, there's a way. So I just kind of never gave up, and I just kept pushing, and opportunity fell on my lap when it did, and I was super grateful when I got into Drew. And it's really like, I feel like that my journey to getting into PA school has really like molded me, and it's really like shaped my experience. So for all the pre-PAs listening, don't give up hope. Like, if this is something that you really want to do, you just have to like stay motivated, and you have to really put in the work to get there. So I like to tell people, like, you know, this wasn't easy for me at all. And you can do it, but you just have to make sure, like, you know, you're doing all the necessary things to get there. So yeah, that's my spiel.
Yeah, that's facts. And I feel like me, Sato, Carlos, again, also has a similar story, Carl too, and we just keep playing this record over of, like, you know, like, it wasn't easy for us. It was a long, tedious journey. And then now they're hearing it from somebody else. So it's like, it's not like we're just making it up. It's like serious, you know, you really got to put in the work. And, you know, your 6-year journey is similar to Sato's in terms of, you know, him applying 6 times, or, you know, my journey from like 2 years of post-bacc, 2 extra years of another post-bacc or whatever. And what I always tell people is, like, you know, we took the scenic route to get to where we're at, you know?
Yes.
Did it suck not getting in the first time? Absolutely. But at the same time, you know, I wouldn't necessarily trade it for anything, because, like what you said, you gained the connections and experiences that you got, all that knowledge you got, definitely helped shape you into the PA student that you are right now.
And honestly, I needed that time, because I honestly, if I would have went to PA school out of undergrad, I would have failed. I would have did horribly. I wouldn't have been mentally prepared for the rigor. I just would not be successful. Everybody. Yeah. And like my program, like the master's that I did, like really like molded and shaped me, because a lot of the courses we took, I ended up retaking in PA school, like anatomy with cadaver lab. It was like, oh, I got this. I just did this like 6 months ago, you know? So it was actually really helpful, especially for first semester and didactic year, with like all of like the basic science, like courses. It was just kind of like, oh, this is kind of a refresher for me. So it was really helpful in that aspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're kind of segueing into it, but tell us a little bit about your experience at Charles Drew. And you know, something that not a lot of people know is that Charles Drew is considered a HBCU. For people who don't know what an HBCU is, can you elaborate a little bit? And also, you know, I'm sure they've heard of Morehouse and, you know, Howard and other colleges on the East Coast, but they don't understand or know that Charles Drew is also an HBCU. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's probably the only HBCU in California, I believe, but I would just have to double check and fact check that. But yeah, so for those of you who don't know, HBCUs are historically Black colleges and universities, and they're spread out through the entire country. As Aaron said, like, you know, the big ones that most people know of are like Morehouse, Howard, Hampton University, FAMU, things like that. But there's like so many across the South and on the East. And I feel like, you know, everybody, I'm personally going to an HBCU now, and I appreciate it. I really appreciate the diversity and inclusion that HBCUs offer. It's a totally different experience when you're not like the only one. You know what I'm saying? With any race, if you ever felt like you were the only one, you would feel like, wow, I stick out like a sore thumb here. You know what I'm saying? Not to say it's a bad thing, but you would think like, okay, I'm the only one. But when you see others that look like you, or when you see a collective or a mix of people, it's like, oh, okay, this is really cool. It's not just only me, right? And I feel like that's what HBCUs offer specifically for African Americans, is like that experience to like be able to go to college or grad school with, you know, people who look like you. And I feel like that's important with like, you know, becoming the person you are and growth and development, and things like that. And I feel like HBCUs offer an experience like no other, because it's like literally my friends who've gone have like raved about college, or raved about how great of a time they had. you know what I'm saying, in college. And even Riverside, I felt like Riverside was such a great experience. Like it was
It
such a
was so
diverse
diverse.
population.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
like I felt
100%.
like it was kind of like if we're gonna put a title on it, I felt like it was like an HBCU of the UCs. I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Almost,
But
yeah.
yeah, it was very diverse at Riverside. So I appreciated that. But I think the biggest thing that I appreciate is the diversity and inclusion that HBCUs bring, especially when it comes to like, especially for us in the professional world. We know, like, you know, specifically for the PA profession, we know the profession isn't as diverse as it should be. You know, we see that with the statistics and the numbers of practicing PAs in this country. So I appreciate that, like, you know, Drew has been very big on diversity and inclusion of everyone, all ethnic backgrounds, and having a curriculum based on that. You know what I'm saying? That's literally what the mission of the school is to, you know, make it like develop us to be healthcare providers to serve underserved communities, right? Because we all know that like studies have shown that, you know, when people of color see like providers who look like them, it tends to yield better outcomes, you know?
Right.
So I really believe like diversity and inclusion is so big, and it should be implemented in, you know, PA education, PA programs across the country, right? But unfortunately, we don't see that everywhere. But I'm hoping that, like, you know, especially with everything that's happened this past year, we can start to break more barriers and really start to like have a seat at the table to start getting things going there. Right? So not just like specifically with having students of like other backgrounds in classes, but actually incorporating like education within PA programs on, like, you know, things of diversity and inclusion. One of the things that Drew that I really loved was we definitely took some courses on like diversity and inclusion. Like I believe it was our second semester, we took psychosocial dynamics of health, right? And how it impacts like various communities. And we just kind of learned about, you know, like we learned how to be culturally aware with like all different types of communities. And like, I know personally, like I'm only getting this at Drew, right? But I know that this should be incorporated in PA programs across the country, right? Because we're all going to be, so no matter who you are, you're going to be serving people of all backgrounds, right? So I think that it's really important to include it in the education aspect, because I feel like, you know, as going into this as providers, you have to be like culturally aware of the patients you're serving. You know what I'm saying? Because it only will establish even better relationship between you and your patient, right? And we all know it's that level of trust that specifically people of color have or need to have with like other races, right? So it's kind of like, you know, starting to include that curriculum and that education in PA programs could be it could really yield good results if it's done the right way, right? So
two things, you know, that I want to point out. I mean, I did the fact check for you, and Charles only HBCU in California.
Yes, I was right about that.
Our listeners know that about that.
Our little insider from earlier. At least I was right about that.
The second thing is, you know, just letting people know that you don't actually have to be Black to attend an HBCU, right?
Exactly.
I was just gonna say,
exactly.
You know, a lot of people think that, you know, HBCUs are strictly for Black students, right? And
no,
which it's not, because there's plenty of people that want to attain the education that you know got, right?
Right.
With like the diversity and the inclusion and stuff like that. And I think it's important for everyone to have an opportunity to go through an education like that, right? So, you know, just for our listeners that, you know, we're thinking, oh, you know, this sounds like an amazing program, but I'm not Black, therefore I can't apply. It's not true. Like, you know, your class, you know, pictures of you and your classmates together and stuff like that. And it's not, you know, a uni race class or by any means at all.
We literally call our class the United Nations. Like literally, like it's like a mixture of everybody. Like, and I love it because that is who we are going to serve. We're serving everybody. I'm not just going to serve African American patients or white or Hispanic or Asian. Like I'm going to be serving everybody. So it's like, why not all come together and learn from one another? Right. And that's kind of what I would love to see incorporated in PA programs across the country. Like how you were talking about, like, you know, the curriculum with derm and stuff like that, right? Or what were you saying about derm and the curriculum with that?
Oh, like how, you know, dermatology, when they're teaching us dermatology, you know, they really need to start giving us like a picture of what like erythema multiforme looks on like white skin versus like, you know, tanner skin versus black skin, right? Because, you know, you're going to be treating people of different skin complexity and tones. And, you know, you need to know what it looks like on various skin colors. Otherwise, I mean, it's very easy to miss, you know, different skin conditions on black skin because we've never actually, right? And that is one of the contributing factors to why black health outcomes are worse than, say, our white, you know, white-skinned, you know, counterparts. It's just that, you know, we don't learn because everything that's taught to us is pretty much on fair skin every single time, right? It's easier for us to see. Right. When you see erythema on white skin, it's red. It's kind of hard to miss it. Right. So, you know, whereas, you know, when you look at it on black skin, it might just be slightly less black. It could be darker. It could be hyperpigmented. You know, it looks completely different. And if we've never actually seen it or never been taught it before, then there's really no way for us to actually be able to notice those kind of things when we're out in practicing.
Yeah.
Another good point about that is, you know, like in PA school, when they teach us diseases that occur in Black patients, it's typically just like sickle cell, sarcoidosis, and, you know, fibroids, and like that's it, you know. But we never are like going back to the derm issue, or, you know, we never really dive into too much depth with like diabetes, because diabetes is super prevalent in you know, African American community, at least from the patients that I've seen too. You know, it goes beyond just like medication management and lifestyle management and stuff. It goes to, you know, on a bigger scale, education, like, you know, public education and public health knowledge. And yeah,
and just to piggyback off of what you're talking about, Aaron, like one thing that like I'm grateful like that I've been taught at Drew is like you wanna approach patients, especially when it comes to like management, especially management of chronic conditions, right? Like it's all about the approach, right? And I feel like sometimes when you approach patients, like you're talking down to them, or you're like nagging them, or you're, you know, you're not making them feel like they're your equal. They won't take what you're saying at face value. Right. But when you can talk to them at their level, and you can talk to them like, hey, like I'm here to like, I want to see what's best for you. And I want to be able to give you that advice. And when you can establish that trust as a provider, right? Going back to like why I feel like some of these courses are necessary to like establish trust within like other communities, like people will take you seriously. Like I've seen it happen to me in clinicals where it's like, you know, I have a white preceptor or a preceptor of another race that like, and I have a Black patient that they don't want to talk to them, but they'll be like, I'll talk to you. Right. And I'm like, that's an issue. I'm like, I'm the student. I'm here to learn, you know, like, but they're willing to open up to me because they see me and they're like, oh, she looks like me, you know, let me just talk to her because she'll probably get it, or she'll probably understand. Right. And it's not to be like, oh, like, you know, this person just doesn't want to talk to other people of other races, or they're racist. It's not even to like try and play that card. It's just like the level of comfortability, like how
trying to build a rapport.
Right. And I've seen providers who like talk down to their patients or like, you know, don't meet them where they are. You know what I'm saying? Like, and especially
Discount
when
their
it comes
pain level and, you know,
right, things like
yeah.
that. And especially when it comes to chronic conditions like diabetes, it's like you're not going to cure diabetes overnight. Like this is going to be like a stepwise thing that you have to like, you know, stay on top of. But you have to literally as a provider be like, you know, okay, I understand this is going to be a marathon, but I'm right there with you. I'm trying to jog the marathon with you. You know what I'm saying? But you have to meet patients at a level where they can understand you and they can put that trust in you. So then you can yield those better health outcomes for them. Right. And I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like there can be a disconnect sometimes. And sometimes when there is that disconnect, that's when we see like these poor health outcomes, especially within communities of color. Because I've seen it firsthand. Like I'm literally talking or like giving patient education on this, and they were like, wow, they never broke it down to me like that. And I'm like, that's like, and it's just like that, you know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like establishing that trust and rapport, especially within communities of color, that can help, you know, help yield better outcomes.
Right. I think it's definitely like an understanding of different communities, right?
Yeah.
You know, I remember having a white provider, you know, not understand why his Asian patient wouldn't stop eating rice when he was a diabetic, right? To us, I mean, we have rice with every meal. It's normal for us, right? So not as easy as someone telling us, okay, don't eat rice, you know, like in the Japanese, you can often eat like a bowl of rice 3 times a day, right? So it's not, you can all of a sudden just be like, oh, don't eat rice, and then your diabetes will get better, right? It's you know, you have a certain amount of understanding of different cultures, right? I think that's one of the things, like, you know, understanding what neighborhoods your patients live in, you know, what's available to them in terms of, you know, food, you know, what, you know, barriers. I think it's all about barriers, right? What are the barriers that your patients are facing? You know, and it's something, honestly, I think it's something that you kind of have to learn as you go along, right? It's up to you to learn what the barriers are, right? You kind of have to almost tease it out of your patients and be like, all right, well, let me take an extra 5-10 minutes with this patient and figure out, well, what's one barrier, right? Because in all honesty, you're not going to be able to sit there and spend an hour with the patient, right? I could do that as a student, but have like, you know, 20, 30 patients to see. I could literally just see one patient an hour if I felt like it, right? So I think, you know, as a provider, you know, you have to understand that we don't get 30 minutes per patient. We really get like 10, maybe 15, right? So, you know, sometimes taking that extra 5 minutes and thinking like, okay, well, let me try to tackle one barrier, right? Let me tackle, okay, well, you know, is there like is a neighborhood safety an issue where you can't just, you know, the patient can't just walk outside? Is that an issue?
Exactly.
Or something, or is it like, okay, well, this patient relies on, like, you know, the pantry to get food. Well, of course, there's nothing really healthy in the pantry, to be honest with you. So, you know, is that a barrier that's preventing them? You know, it's just, you just have to take time to try to delve in a little deeper. And because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're there for the patient, really, right? So justice if, you know, if we weren't at least attempting to tackle one of the issues.
Yeah, totally agree.
But I know usually what our main topic was, which was, you know, talking about
the HBCUs. I know. I was like, wait.
Right. And I know we're kind of running out of time here to talk about it, since the timer just came up that we only have like 10 minutes left. But
Okay.
You want to talk about Mackenzie Scott and what she did, right?
Oh yeah. So Mackenzie Scott, ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, she just had a large contribution to HBCUs. I believe it was about like 20 million. She donated to, like, I want to say it was like Howard, Morehouse, and there was a list, but it wasn't like the entire list, you know?
It was 160 million, and then the schools included
160,
Hampton, Tuskegee, Howard, Spelman, Morehouse, amongst several others that they didn't list. But yeah.
Right. And I just feel like with the HBCUs, I always feel like there's always like the big HBCUs and then the forgotten HBCUs. And I feel like with the forgotten HBCUs, it's like these schools probably need just as much of that funding or even more of that funding than like some of the other ones. I'm not trying to take away from like any of the HBCUs, but I feel like there's always the forgotten ones. Like a lot of people probably don't even know that Drew is an HBCU, right? And there's so many more across the country that are like not always named and don't always get like, you know, the credit of like, oh, this is an HBCU, right? But it's like, just because, you know, they're not named doesn't mean we should forget about them, you know? Mm-hmm. And I feel like there should be a more of an emphasis for the smaller schools as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would have loved it if Mackenzie was like, okay, maybe I'll give half of it to like the bigger ones and the other half to like, you know, the smaller ones. Or if she would have divided it up amongst all the HBCUs. Evenly. Exactly. Right. Exactly. I would have respected her so much. Like, you know, I would have been like, wow, like, you know, so.
Right. We don't even realize that some of these schools are HBCUs, right? I mean, I was just scrolling down the list right now and I'm looking like Grambling State. These are like schools that, you know, you see if you follow college football or college basketball, like Coppin State.
Yeah.
You know,
there's so many HBCUs.
A lot of HBCUs that we don't even realize they're HBCUs, you know, and they're, I mean, you know, they might not be world renowned or, you know, like well-known schools even in the US, but, you know, people that pay attention to sports or pay attention to other things will realize that, you know, a lot of the times we just don't even realize, you know?
Right. And I just feel like that funding, those resources, can always be used to help develop things, right? We always talk about diversity, inclusion. We always talk about recruitment. We always talk about things like that, but we need, like, schools like that need the funding to be able to do those things, right? To be able to, like, you know, grab those people and get people into college and do what they have to do to, like, have, like, you know, student success and less retention and things like that. So I just feel like, don't forget about the HBCUs that are smaller. You know, I just want people to understand that it's not just, you know, the big names out there that you always hear. Think about the other schools, or even if you're applying to PA school, consider them. You know what I'm saying? Like Aaron and Sato were saying earlier, like, you know, HBCUs are just not meant only for Black people. Like, literally, like, they're meant for everyone. You know what I'm saying? And they're probably the most diverse, like, universities in the nation. So
perfect segue to, like, our Minority Report Pearl for today, right?
Time for this episode's Minority Report Pearls. These are valuable tips from the Minority Report that are relevant to this episode's topic of discussion.
So, like we said, the Pearl was, you know, like, you know, just the battle on, like, education reform and, like, not letting up, you know, especially with this year. This year has been a monumental year, in my opinion. Everything we've dealt with in 2020, we're going to be talking to our grandkids about. It's been a lot, but especially with, like, social justice reform in this country has been a huge topic. And I feel like, you know, I think, you know, things are starting to, like, we're starting to creep back into, like, our normal way of life. There was a point where this is the only thing we were talking about, right? And so now we're creeping back into, like, okay, everybody's getting back to, like, the way they do things. And I just don't want things to be forgotten. You know, I just don't want people to forget about the movement and what the movement stands for. And specifically for PAs and PA program and PA education, like, I would love to see, like, this movement across, like, PA education specifically. You know, how I talked about how, like, I was in a course in my specific program that, you know, catered towards, like, you know, diversity inclusion with your patient care population. Like, I would love to see a course like that implemented in every PA program across this country, because I feel like exactly what I said earlier, we're all going to be healthcare providers serving people of various populations. So being able to establish that trust as a provider with someone who doesn't look like you is so key, right? And I get that everyone doesn't always grow up in the same background. Like, you know what I'm saying? The way I grew up, from the way you grew up, Sato, from the way Aaron grew up, we all had different journeys. But at the end of the day, we're all coming together to, you know, provide the best care to our patients. And I feel like if we can do anything in our education to help with that, why not? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like this doesn't really get talked about. We always talk about the medicine, and we know the medicine is always going to be there. This is why we're here. But there's other layers to this process that, you know, don't get talked about or aren't taught or aren't, you know, implemented in curriculums that need to be there, you know? So I would like for the push to be for like PA education to push for, you know, having this implemented across the board, you know, especially at us going into being in the health sector as providers, to especially to be able to give the best possible care to patients of any kind of background. So
I think it's like important, right? Because we only have 3 more minutes left, but you know, it doesn't matter if you're a pre-PA, you know, you're a pre-PA about to matriculate into a PA program, you know, holding your PA program accountable, right? Letting them know what I want. I'm the one that's paying, you know, $160,000 to come here to your program. I'm the one that chose your program. You know, this is what I expect from you guys, and this is what I. If you're a practicing PA, then ensuring that this is like, you know, happening in your clinics or in your, you know, your hospital group, or, you know, making sure that, you know, where like the different barriers and stuff like that are addressed, or, you know, making sure top priority for your group. If you're in education, right, then making sure that these kind of courses, you know, are really being taught at your institution, right? Whether you're just like a fresh new faculty member, or if you're like a 20, 30-year veteran, it really doesn't matter, right? We should all be pushing for educational reform. And what better place to start it than in the PA profession, right? Where we are in this community. So with that being said, you know, I appreciate you coming, you know, spending time,
enlightening us.
With us. You know, we're all finally in California together, so, you know,
I know.
Pretty soon, hopefully, you know, we can do some social distancing, hanging out or something like that, you know, get some food, hang out at like a park or something like that, and just sit around and have like a, you know, a catch-up session, I guess. That'll be pretty awesome.
I'm just excited for us being providers in the future, and like what we're about to bring to the table. Like, I feel like change is coming, and I feel like the new wave is here, you know. So I just hope that we, you know, keep this momentum, and we do our best to be the best providers possible and give the best patient care possible. So
agreed. Well, thanks again, Marian.
Yes, no worries. It was an honor. Oh my God, I was on the Minority Report.
Thank you for everyone that tuned in for another episode of Minority Report. We try to record at least one episode every week if we can. So, you know, stay tuned for the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, give us feedback. We always appreciate any kind of feedback, or if you want to talk about certain things, or if you want to be a guest on our podcast, definitely hit us up at minority.rapport.movement on Instagram.